Welcome to Lit Politics. I'm State Senator Alessandra Yuh-Line, representing the 34th District, covering parts of the Bronx and Westchester counties.
And I'm Assemblymember Yuh-Line, representing the 65th District in Manhattan, covering all of Lower Manhattan. Today, we are going to be having a dialogue from both of our houses, the Senate and the Assembly.
That's right, to shine a light and to have an important dialogue
about the process that we know as government.
And most importantly, how it affects you.
We're actually continuing our ongoing series of short explainers on why everyone in New York is angry at Governor Cuomo for his conduct around coronavirus-related nursing home deaths and that special cushy relationship that he has with the powerful healthcare industry executives and their lobbyists.
That's right, and last time we discussed Cuomo's open door policy with the nursing home industry, mega donors, and how that resulted in an industry-written, lobbyist-sold immunity for nursing homes that saw over 15,000 elderly residents die from COVID-19. So now, let's dive in, shall we? Let's talk about the hearings that occurred as a result of those sketchy deals and how the governor's office made every wrong decision possible in choosing to cover up the scale of their mismanagement. How many times or how many instances did the legislature make that overture, that request for information from not only the executive but from the Department of Health? And how did that play out in the hearings that we had in August?
I lost count. When back in August, the legislature, both the Assembly and the Senate, did a joint hearing on the impact of COVID-19 on hospitals and nursing homes. It was hearings that I co-chaired, and they were over 30 hours in length when you take all of them together. And during this time, the Department of Health produced the Commissioner of Health, and we asked him very direct questions about this data, and he seemed to pulled himself into a pretzel, frankly, to not answer the question and to insist that they had been doing it right, that they had been counting the numbers. And just to linger on this for a second. The reason why this is important, the reason why this data and this information is important is because, yes, as the governor said himself, they died, right? And he added, who cares? And this is a direct quote from the governor.
But who cares? 33, 28, died in a hospital, died in a nursing home. They died.
But these folks died, but where they died is important, and where they came from is important, because if a patient dies in a hospital but came from this nursing home, knowing that makes us go back to the record of that nursing home. We can determine when they got infected, how they got infected, what kind of protocols exist there, and then we can make better policy, as we are doing as legislators, to fix that problem. But the governor thought that it was not necessary to provide us with that information. So to answer your question, how many times we asked him? Dozens and dozens and dozens. And it was not until the Attorney General, and thank the Lord for her, because she did her job, produced a report which made a general calculation that maybe the governor's office had undercounted the deaths of people in hospitals from nursing homes by maybe 50%. And then within hours of that report, the governor produced numbers that said that they had undercounted it only by 46%. But that tells you everything that you need to know. They had these numbers, they've always had these numbers, and it just suggests that they were sitting on them to make sure that the governor looked good for his TV appearances.
As the healthcare chair, what significance do these numbers have for you and for the policy that you might have changed during this time?
So as I said earlier, knowing where people died and how they died and where they came from before they were transferred to a hospital, if they indeed passed away in a hospital, is important for us to determine what happened at the nursing home before they were admitted to the hospital. There are a series of bills that just in the last few weeks we've moved through my committee, the Health Committee, as well as the Aging Committee in the Senate, that relate to setting higher standards, for setting higher standards of quality within the facilities, setting standards for transfers and involuntary or voluntary discharges, for making sure that there's transparency in data, for setting transparency for ownership of nursing homes. And all of this are things that came as a direct result of the information that we were able to get from that hearing. But a lot of it has been like pulling teeth because we haven't had clarity from the governor's office. So, at the end of the day, we will continue to make good policy here. We will move forward, and we will do the things that we need to do to protect vulnerable New Yorkers. But we also need to make sure that we hold accountable those folks who have not been clear with us when they needed to be.
I'm like thinking about it, and honestly, they could have just given us the numbers.
But that would be too easy. Speaking of the numbers, on April 17th of 2020, the state for the first time released data on COVID-19 deaths in nursing homes, broken down by facility. And later, in May, the state updated how they counted COVID-19 deaths in nursing homes to include presumed cases in addition to confirmed cases. This very addition of presumed cases to confirmed cases increased the total at the time to 1,700 deaths.
And we're talking about the presumed cases because we didn't know that much about COVID at the time.
That's right.
And at that time, testing wasn't readily available. So I think that's why we have to let folks know what presumed cases mean. And we know this though from the beginning, and this is what's really, really crucial for nursing home deaths, is that we already knew from the beginning that the most vulnerable with the most difficult symptoms of COVID-19 were obviously the seniors and people with pre-existing conditions.
That's right. And so where does the federal government come into all of this, right? Well, they start to require nursing homes in mid-May to provide data on COVID-19 deaths, both within their facilities, those who died there, as well as those who died after being sent to the hospital. This is a key point where literally the house of cards starts to crumble.
I believe at the same time, we were hearing on the ground, reporters and newspapers reporting these horrific stories about how people were discovering or I guess the reporters were discovering that people were literally in piles, like in rooms in these nursing homes, like literally bodies found piled because the morgues were so full. And the reporters actually at that time were trying to get the actual numbers of COVID-related deaths. And I remember that they actually reported that they asked the state for the total death tally and were denied.
That's right.
And that's really startling. And I remember that it was actually our AP reporters and the New York Times that actually went and did their own research.
And on tallies.
Yeah, on the tally and report, and they found out that there were far higher numbers than were reported by the state at that time in the nursing homes. And that's when I think things started to really blow up.
And the AP found, actually, that there were 4,500 COVID-19 patients sent from hospitals to nursing homes. And in July, later, the state issued a report analyzing COVID deaths in nursing homes and blamed the high deaths on asymptomatic staff and visitors instead of the state's policy of transferring COVID-positive patients from hospitals to nursing homes. Can you
What's
believe
nuts is later on, they literally have a requirement that staff go back to work, I believe.
They did have a requirement.
That's nuts. Even if they were, in contact with and maybe were suspected of being COVID positive.
That's right. And all the while, the governor was repeatedly touting that he had lowered death rates in the state of New York compared to most other states. But those of us who were on the ground, we felt the numbers around us were higher. We knew
you have the most nursing homes in your district.
In any state senate district, that's right. And so as the public continues to reel from the deaths and really the hurt and the pain and the trauma of losing a loved one in the wake of the pandemic, the legislature knew we had to figure out what was going on. And so the inquiries continue into the executive branch of government to figure out how many people die. And so that's why we had the hearings in the summer.
So these public hearings focused on the impact of COVID-19. 3 of the hearings actually focused on hospitals and residential healthcare facilities. So we had a whole slew of hearings.
That's right.
I mean, I wasn't on the healthcare committee, but you're on the health committee for the Senate. And the hearing for the hospitals was held on August 12th, while the hearings for the residential healthcare facilities were on the 3rd and on the 10th of August. This will be significant, I think, when you talk about a little bit about what's going on in the hearings. But the hearings were actually meant to review New York State's rate of infection and mortality due to COVID-19 in these facilities. And you were in these hearings because you're in the health committee, like we said. But let's play the video of your questions alongside some of our other colleagues. And I think that this is where a lot of the controversy comes from, because these are the questions that weren't answered.
So now that we're all in the realm of immunity, and to your point, Mr. Rasky, that you provide historically drafts of legislation to legislators as well as others. Is it fair to say that you provided a draft of the immunity provision to the executive branch?
I just said that, yes.
Yes. And just to be super clear, the press release that Assemblymember Kim was referring to, that was later deleted by Greater New York Health, actually stated, quote, that Greater New York Health drafted and aggressively advocated for the legislation. But you had just stated that Greater New York Health did not actually draft the legislation. So which one of these statements is true?
No, I'm going to be very clear. We gave the executive branch a draft of legislation, okay, a provision. That draft is not what was the final law. It was extensively changed and increased in terms of breadth. So to say that we drafted it would be wrong.
Okay, so
However, what you're referencing was a member's letter that was sent out, which reflected a misstatement on our part of that.
So let's talk about the cover-up and the screw-up, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay, so unfortunately for the governor's office, conspiracies of silence only take one misplaced sentence to send them crashing straight into the ground. And that happened on Friday, February 10th, when one of Cuomo's top aides, Melissa DeRosa, admitted to Democratic lawmakers that the governor's office delayed the release of COVID-19 death rates in nursing homes, misleading not only a co-equal branch of government, the legislature, but also deceiving the United States Department of Justice and the public in the process.
Honestly, why would anybody do that? And why did all this happen? Why did the governor choose to cover up the true story of New York's nursing home death rate?
Because he was worried about the politics. That's what DeRosa told us. And in Cuomo's version of the events, his cover-up was meant to spare the legislature the indignity of facing criticism from Donald Trump over what he would have called another failure of blue states to contain the virus.
Let me repeat that. At a time when the governor should have been concerned about gaining control of our state's public health crisis, apparently they are saying he was actually worried about the bad things Donald Trump might say about him and New York.
Yeah.
All right. Well, according to Melissa DeRosa, the administration then froze, quote unquote, under the pressure.
You wouldn't know that looking at Cuomo's public statements or the book on leadership that he wrote during the peak of the crisis, if only Cuomo had respected New Yorkers enough to own that error and come clean. Instead, he diverted resources into covering up what now looks like a sweeping dereliction of duty.
What makes this situation even worse, in my opinion, is that New Yorkers may never actually have a full accounting of what happened if Melissa DeRosa did not slip up. And no matter what framing the governor tries to slap on this disgraceful moment in office, let's be clear that Cuomo's chief concern was actually protecting himself in all of this, and from the political fallout or whatever, instead of protecting New Yorkers. And this is in the middle of when New Yorkers needed all of us the most. You know, we deserve better than a governor who only gives New Yorkers the truth when one of his aides makes a mistake.
At least having a governor with emotional intelligence. Don't you agree?
So, let's talk about something that a lot of people probably asked you about already. What happened in that phone call between you and the governor?
Yeah, I mean, the phone call came, roughly an hour after the bombshell article about his aide and what she said in the private meeting the day before regarding why they covered up those numbers because there was a middle of a political football and they didn't want the data to be used, against them from the Department of Justice. They think it was for political reasons. And obviously that could be a serious admission to a possible obstruction of justice if she admitted that they were hiding numbers for political reasons. After that report came out, the governor called at 8 p.m. And it was a 10-minute call, but it seemed like an hour conversation with them where he's yelling and he is making political threats that he can go out tomorrow and do all sorts of bad things and ruin my career and my livelihood, and just making real shocking threats as I'm about to, in the process of bathing my kids, my three daughters, and my wife was, around me at the time when the phone came in. And she was obviously like turning pale, just overhearing the conversation. And the request was um, that I needed to issue a statement that pretty much says that I didn't hear what I heard the other day, and this is what I heard. You're gonna say A, B, and C. You're not a lawyer. You didn't hear it right, basically, and you need to say this, and you need to issue it tonight, not tomorrow, like right away. And this was all done through mostly yelling and intimidating language, and it was a very uh, evidence of a very abusive tactic, um, and from what I hear from other colleagues, a pattern of abusive behavior by the governor, and that left my wife in shock for almost 2 hours, and she didn't get any sleep that night, and to a point where we're arguing and even fighting because the immediate thing that she's doing is blaming me and for putting us in this position. And yeah, that's it. And it's Lunar New Year, so we're trying to get past it. Just de-link from the moment. But they were incessantly calling me, the governor himself, again on Saturday. There's nonstop. His staff is also following up. And it got to a point where I needed to protect myself, I feel like, and I had to get a lawyer and have my attorney on Monday let the governors know that I have an attorney. I let them know who he was, and anything involving this matter or any nursing home related issue, I told them that they have to reach out to my attorney.
So, how many times did they try to contact you?
Yeah, he himself 4 times, and other people tried about 4 times. Phone, text, all uh, voicemails. Yeah.
It's harassing behavior.
Harassment.
Yes. But it is a pattern of behavior, and that's the unfortunate part of where our state government is at the moment. But regardless of that, Ron, you sharing your story is incredibly powerful and impactful, and it's encouraging a lot of other people to speak up.
Can you explain why they wanted you to send out that statement?
Yeah, that's a good question. And this is the part that I think it's very important because why do they feel so adamant to get those statements out there? And I think, um, Melissa accidentally, I think, told the truth that implicated all of us in a cover up, and she admitted a cover up, and I think they were trying their best to change that story. And if the people in the room, uh, the members and the senators said that's not what I heard, and I heard something else, it kind of diffuses and it kind of invalidates the whole episode. And furthermore, I think once I make that statement, um, I'm also neutralized in the sense that I'm also discredited moving forward. I think it's a combination of all those things, but at the same time, I recognize if I do that's what I heard. That was what I perceived it. That's how I perceived what she said. But once I lie for the governor, now I'm also implicated in the larger cover up of nursing home deaths. And the very thought that that could possibly happen after 10 months of doing my job, doing our jobs to get to the truth, now that I might be implicated in a cover up, was a moment when and everything went off and I said, I cannot do that.
And some people know the story, but why did you feel so adamant that something needed to be done about what was going on in nursing homes in the first place?
Well, it started when a constituent named Berna Lee reached out to me in April. And the email I'll show you if I can, but he was like, people are killing my mother. Like this is a criminal act, like in bold letters, right? Like they're mass murders happening in nursing homes. Like she was like one staff was like, stay away. Like this is clearly like she's like not well. She's not sane. And the other staff was like, well, I don't know. Let's see. Let me call her. I'm like, I'm reading. I'm like, for whatever reason in that moment, I don't know. Sometimes I know you as electors, you do this too. Some sort of a gut, you get a gut feeling, um, and you just act. You don't know why. It could be irrational. I, for whatever reason, decided to call her directly when I read the email on that moment, despite some of my staff told me not to do that. Um, and I believed her, by the way. She's telling me everything what's going on, and I believed her. And I was like, meet me there tomorrow. So I met her at the nursing home, and it was all true. Like her mother is in there. They won't tell me what's going on, and there's people. She's showing me pictures. Like she's on the hallway. Her person next door just died of COVID. It's spreading everywhere. It's literally happening inside, and there's bodies are being like transferred out because they're dying. Like 80 people died that like in the nursing home in like 1 month. And just imagine your mother, right? Like you can't get access. It was like that. She's like freaking out, and that's how it all started. And that story, the New York Times reporter also showed up that day, because I also recognized that I can't do this alone. Like governor's not going to tell the truth. He's not going to help me get to the truth. But we all know what he responds to. So, all right, let's get the reporters. Let's expose the truth. New York Times runs a big story, right? And then one after another, constituents piling on. Same thing's happening to me. Help me, Ron. Like, what can I do to get my mother out? In the middle of all that, my uncle died of presumed COVID in a local Flushing nursing home. So that was like, a whole different level. Now, my uncle and I, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here sitting with you. Like he is the one that sponsored the visa for me and my parents to come to this country. He's the one that gave me my name, my English name, because he was like the first damn Republican Korean from Flushing, and he was like a big Ronald Reagan fan. He thought that it would be funny to name me after Ronald Reagan, and ironically, I spent all my adult years trying to undo everything that Reagan did. But so this is like my uncle, right? He was a veteran, he was a dentist, and he died alone in pain. And if you heard of how people died in agony from COVID, you can't breathe, the lungs are shot, you're literally asking people to take your life. Like that's how painful this process is. And he did it alone with no one by himself. And he didn't have a funeral. And that's the story of 15,000 fucking families in New York. That's what happened to all these families. And for this governor to go on his public press conference and his press secretary to tell these families, you're a bunch of death cults. You guys, because I wasn't around, there was a void, and you're stupid because you couldn't connect the dots. I'm sorry that you're stupid that you couldn't connect those dots. I created a void. That is his apology to these families. Like, just think about just visualize what that feels like, right? That this is how your loved one died, and this is how the governor, the ageist language that he puts out, who cares where they died? Like, I would, just imagine how that makes the person feel, and that's why, to answer your question, Yuh-Line, um, I've been so passionate about like getting to the truth, and out of the Senator Biaggi, I know that you don't like to talk about it that much, but you also are a caregiver. I know that I've heard through the grapevines that this is something that is very deep in inside your heart. So I know exactly that I know that you know how what a caring world and a caring society should look like, and we're nowhere near it.
Thank you for sharing that, Ron. Thank you for being here too, and just being willing to constantly tell this story over and over and over again. But just going back to the immunity language, how dangerous do you think that immunity language was in the first place? And why do you think that it is the crux of what the governor wants to cover up?
The immunity language and repealing the immunity is not what the industry wants. The people who wrote the very bill, they pushed and pushed for it, and they did it quietly for a reason, to protect their business interest. And imagine us at the moment revealing the truth and repealing it, the whole thing. That is the last thing that they wanted, and they had full access. Senator, we all saw the inside documents, what the institutions were looking at when we're drafting language. There's only a couple of people, couple of groups listed on that pager that we're not supposed to share, but they see. I didn't have it, but they see it, and that was such a demoralizing moment. Like my heart sank that we as an institution and all three branches, we're not centering solutions around the people. We're all kind of looking at the same industry groups who's drafting these bills, and that is why they could not disclose the total death numbers. And everybody was in it, right? We had that hearing where grueling the hospitals, like, you have the numbers, you're required by the law. Why don't you just, if DOH doesn't want to share it, you, the hospitals, can hand it over to us, and then we can put it together, right? But with DOH, the commissioner, well, we have to make sure vetted, we have to connect the name, the initials from nursing homes to the hospital number. There's two different softwares. If you're not trying to hide anything, if you have the raw data, if you're really busy and trying to save people's lives, you'd be like, you know what, Senator, you know what, I don't have time for this crap. Here's 20,000 boxes. You figure it out. Like, here's the raw number. Screw you. Like, that's what, that's how normal people do, because they don't have anything to hide. But they needed time to connect the dots, and it really just to stall, so we don't have a reason to overreact, to repeal things. And mind you, his book, when was it published? In October. It was published in October. Imagine if New York was number one in fatality rate, come September. That was not going to be good for his book deal. Now I can't prove that, but I think that's people are speculating a lot of different motives were involved.
How long did we wait for those numbers, Ron?
6 months, Yuh-Line. 6 months. We asked them for in August, and then there was lawsuits, there was FOIA requests, and we won the lawsuit, and the AG requested it, and right before they released it, they brought us in to that meeting with Melissa. All right, we want to make good. Now we're about partnerships and collaboration. I was told, I'm not going to say by outsiders, to be tamed before entering that space. I was advised, can you be? I can't. You do what you want to do, but just the governor's people requested, can you be professional, etc. I'm like, okay. And then I
Is that how
walked
you
in,
said it?
and
Okay.
I was like, okay. and then Dick Godfrey's like, boom. Dick Godfrey's like, be quiet. Yo, where's my number? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what is going on? Like, I thought I was gonna be the bad cop. Like, he was like Tom Cruise from Few Good Men. Like, I want the truth. I'm like, Dick.
Tell us
Yeah, so
about that.
that's
Tell us
how it
about
went
that
down.
meeting.
The meeting was 2 hours long, mostly boring. I was zooming back and forth with you for our
Yeah. Yeah,
conference.
that's right.
But it was that moment when Melissa had that few good, man moment. And it's like, I want the truth. If you want the truth, like, I'll give it to you. And that's when she, shared all of what went down. That there was a dealing with Trump when there was political football and the Department of Justice is launched. So we didn't know what data that we should be sharing because they were going to use that information against us. Basically admitting that they had the data, but they purposely didn't do it for political reasons.
So it really was like A Few Good Men. It was literally like, you want the truth, you can't handle the truth.
I mean, I honestly feel like, based on my private phone conversation, I feel like Andrew Cuomo, Governor Cuomo, I think wants to be Jack Nicholson and just tell the world, like I ordered the code red. Like you can't live without what like I'm gonna be at the wall. Like you need me in New York and Albany. Like I feel like he would have said that if I just egged him on the phone. Like because that's how he was yelling. Like it was like honestly like it's insane. Like this seems like a movie. Like everything feels like a movie. And yeah, it's highly stressful, right, for all of us. I just want to get past it. There's an investigation. I'm sure they'll do their job, and we should just move forward. But next steps, are we going to chicken out with the powers, or are we going to actually do something of substance? So we'll know in the next week or so. My members are calling. I don't know about you. They're saying, fuck the powers. Like they're going to expire anyways. Let's just impeach him. Like member by member, they're calling me and laying that out. So things are organically shifting. I'm not even doing anything. They're just saying this is clearly an abuse of power, and we have a responsibility to take it further.